Recording in progress.
All right.
She says it's so lovely.
I'll let them in and we'll give it a couple of minutes.
I'm gonna mute myself.
All right. So we're waiting on just a couple more people. We'll get started here within the next 5 minutes or so. So just a little bit about this program because this is fairly unique. Basically, what we are going to be doing is not learning about history, so to speak, but it is my hope that this will be more of an experience. So you should be experiencing history. And instead of trying to remember the dates and facts, this is more about emotional connection. So hopefully I can bring that to you guys tonight and enjoy a nice relaxation on top of feeling a little bit of Black history. Yeah, and nobody needs to be on camera for this event. And in fact, it's probably best that you don't because this is going to be more of a relaxation exercise. So hopefully your eyes will be closed for most of the experience, which will allow you to really get the full effects of what we are doing. So actually at this point, if you aren't already, find a nice comfortable seat. Somewhere that you can really relax, even lay down. So if you want to like lay in the bed or lay on the couch, as long as you're not too tired because you might fall asleep. But wherever you can get most comfortable. So go ahead and find that comfortable seat and we'll get started here in a second.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Brittany Threets, and I'm the Chief Experience Officer at Cosme. Dr. Piercy and I actually went to high school together in Japan and remained friends since. I'm actually getting a lot of feedback on his mic. There we go. Thank you so much. I was hearing double voices and I was like, I'm going to sound crazy. As the CXO, I help Dr. Piercy with pitches and proposals, brand recognition, and website aesthetics, and innovating new programs and possibilities at Cosme. So the man, Jeremiah Piercy is a doctor of cognitive psychology and a United States Air Force veteran with over 17 years of diverse experience working with people of various ethnicities, cultures, and ages. He is the oldest of 5 children and grew up traveling the world while his father served 20 years in the U.S. Air Force. Jeremiah uses his experience traveling abroad and learning languages to meet people where they are. This diverse experience allows him to cultivate meaningful connections with people and implement unique teaching methods that incorporate mindfulness and meditative practices. His goal is to employ his expertise to help people reduce stress, understand their mind-body connections, maintain focus and motivation, and improve their livelihood. So, Dr. Piercy, would you like to take it? And I'll mute myself.
Yeah, that works. Okay, thank you. Okay, so thank you for the introduction, Brittany. So again, this is more of an experience for those of you that may have missed it initially. I will be recounting dates and times and places and historical facts and peoples, but this is not a history lesson. This is a lesson in empathy or a lesson in experience, and all you really need to do is to relax and just listen. And hopefully this will be an engaging event where you'll feel something like a story, where you will find yourself seeing these places, these peoples, and feeling some of the emotions that go along with that. So in order to do this effectively, I like to start with just a short breathing exercise. It only takes about a minute, but just go ahead and find that nice comfortable seat if you haven't already. And as you're getting comfortable, go ahead and just close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so. And then all I'm going to do is count to 5 for the inhale and count to 5 for the exhale. So as long as you sync your breath to the count, then you will be able to get through this exercise, and then we'll go from there into the guided portion of this event. So just go ahead and relax, and I'll start the count. So just inhale up to the count of 5, and then exhale to the count of 5. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now just keep breathing just like that. You don't have to think about it too much, but just continue to let the body relax and maintain that calm feeling while you continue to breathe just a little slower than normal. And as you do, we'll start this off with some of the quotes I have to introduce what the focus will be tonight, which is to focus on the chains of the new world. So, to kind of set that up, Thomas Jefferson said, "I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, that his justice cannot sleep forever," in regard to the things that the country has done. Rosa Parks said, "I have learned over the years that when one's mind is made up, this diminishes fear. Knowing what must be done does away with fear." And then lastly, Toni Morrison said, "The very serious function of racism is distraction. It keeps you from doing your work. It keeps you from explaining, or it keeps you explaining over and over and over again your reason for being." And so now if you think about this time, the first slaves are landed in 1517. They initially landed with the Spanish conquistadors in the Caribbean islands, but then they were brought to other places on mainland North America, such as Florida. Now, most of the people that were taken from the coast of Africa to the coast of the United States were tribes of all kinds. This wasn't just one set of African people. These were groups of small individual cultures of people. These were peoples that didn't even speak the same language in some cases, so far removed that their only commonality was the color of their skin. But still, they were all herded together and sold into slavery, taken on these ships, sailing months across the ocean. And to really feel what that would have been like for them, everything that you knew, all of the things you dreamt of doing, the people you were surrounded by, the land that you lived in your whole life, suddenly nothing more than just a faded haze on the horizon as you sail off into the sunset, heading west. And as you sit there in this boat, perhaps missing your friends or family, maybe you're not even really sure what is going on, because how could you? You don't speak their language. All you know is that you now find yourself in chains, shackled in the inside of this boat, possibly hearing the waves as they crash against the side of the vessel as you sail across the Atlantic. Maybe you hear the creaking of the ship as each wave rolls up against it. Maybe you hear the chains of so many other people in the ship with you as they rattle and clang. But then maybe you hear nothing at all. Not a sound. You could drop a pin and everybody's ears would perk. Because what do you say? Besides the tears falling all around you. Many of these people you can't even speak to, or comfort even if you wanted to, because you're chained. And as you continue sailing for months on end, potentially, you aren't given special treatment on this vessel. Whether you live or die is of no concern to the people that have you. And so you sail with little water and little food. And slowly, some of the people around you succumb to disease, illness, injury, or maybe just downright cruelty. But you survive, however one does in such conditions. But 1 out of every 6 slaves on your vessel and on the many others that would follow perish in the travel from Africa to the West. And so after this long period of time, perhaps you hear, "Land ho!" called out above. Maybe you can even feel the vessel as it lurches, as the anchor drops to the depths of the sea, slowing the ship, holding it in place. As then the slavers come down and begin to take you, one by one, heading out of the vessel. Maybe you are greeted with the fresh air of a new world, but this air feels weird. It would feel odd to someone coming from Africa, landing on the coast of the Northeast. And so, from the very beginning, everything is different. Everything is new. And so, you begin to be herded off the boat. Go off the boat, don't look head down, just go, go off the, don't look head down, just go, off the, don't look head down, just go. You all walk off the ship. The chains dragging down the gangplank. And then you are met with the sound of this new world. And your new life begins. What life? You couldn't be sure. As everything has changed in such a short period of time. And here in this world, you would learn a new way of life, a new way to survive in some of the harshest conditions. You continue onward. Now, the settlers in 1619 would build colonies up and down the East Coast, first landing in Jamestown. But slavery would quickly take hold in the United States as this new world needed developed. And so trees were felled, cabins and houses were built, crops were started, and of course, labor was needed. And the easiest way to get labor was to get it from Africa. And so, the slaves found themselves in this new world. They had ragged huts made out of poles and some animal skins. Some of the cracks were filled with mud and moss. Some weren't. There weren't any good beds, just scaffolds nailed up to the wall, made out of poles and old ragged bedding thrown on them. It was hard sleeping. It was always difficult sleeping. The minute you lay your head down, a flood of memories of times that seem like centuries ago rush your head. And you find sleep difficult to find. But even then, even on the ragged bedding, it felt good. At the end of the day, those long, hard days of work in the fields, spending 14, 16, sometimes even 18 hours toiling in the fields. And most of the time, when you went to your quarters at night, you were able to rest. But sometimes they would call you still, call you to help with the cotton and the wool. But there were also times where joy was found. And slaves, no matter their condition, were able to find peace and harmony amidst such a gruesome existence. But you would see young folks frolicking. They would sing songs, and they would visit from cabin to cabin. And maybe you'd even notice that when they fell behind in field work, sometimes the slave, after dinner, would toil for a few hours more in the fields. Slaves worked after dinner on Saturdays, perhaps at the place you are. It wasn't often, but once the work was done, oh, those Saturday nights. That was when the slaves got together and danced. Some of the masters allowed this. Maybe you remember how George played a harmonica-like instrument, and he could blow grand dance music. Maybe there were drums as you would celebrate some of the rituals and cultural aspects that were brought from Africa. But even then, and even with permission, you had to be careful. Noisy activities were not allowed after 10 o'clock on any night. And on Sundays, they went to church and visited each other. The white folks, that is. But folks didn't spend as much time looking for a good time, because there were not very many good times to be had. Your world consisted of that plantation and those peoples. Outside of that plantation and those people around you, the world was non-existent. The only news you heard is from the news of other slaves as they would pass story or rumor from person to person. But you would hear of nothing else unless you could sneak near where your master would talk. And so, in the North, the labor-intensive but lucrative tobacco crops took up most of the slaves' time. But as these efforts in the North became fruitful for the slave owners and the companies or peoples that owned them, it would catch on and start to migrate to the South. In the South, where there would be cotton to pick, becoming the backbone of American society and commerce 100 years later. And so, it was the stories that kept you going, the people around you. And maybe you've even heard stories of other slaves that are either free through some manner or escaped. For me personally, my papa was Lucien Dole. I was born in Louisiana in the Lafayette Parish, between Broussard and Warville. On this day, I am 97 years old. I didn't have any brothers or sisters on my slave plantation, except for half-ones. It's like this. My mama was a house servant in the Duhan family. She was the hairdresser. One day she barbered her master's son, who was Lucien. He says that he'll shave her head if she won't do what he likes. After that, she his woman till he marries a white lady. My grandmama was stolen from Africa, and she lived to be 125 years old. She died last year in April. But I think I'll live as long as she did. There were 15 slaves on the land that the Duhans owned. But I never ran around with them. I had a room at the back of the big house. You know, Madame Duhan was my grandmama. She was good to me. The only thing I did was look to my master's horse and be a coachman for the madam. Master had 4 sons. They were Regan, Jacques, Lucien, and Desire. Desire was shot at the dance. And it was through these stories that you began to learn of other ways. And so any time a slave would come to your plantation, maybe you were thirsty for knowledge, for understanding. When my mama was 22 years old, she married a polite Landry slave. Then she went to the Landry plantation There was often marrying between the two plantations. When they married, the wife went to her man's plantation. That made no difference. It wouldn't be long before a girl from the other place married into the man's plantation. That kept things in balance. My mama, she married Fairjust Williams. They had 2 sons and a daughter. I didn't know them so much. They were brothers and sister. I was 22 years old when the first rebellion came. I wasn't really bothered about freedom. I didn't leave my master till he died. Then I went to work for Mr. Polite Landry. I was always in good hands. Some slaves were treated bad. Mr. Natalie Valine beat up a slave for stealing. He beat him so hard he lay in front of the gate a whole day and the night. I worked on farms my whole life. And then I came to Beaumont, Texas. And by these times, the population of slaves is growing at an astronomical rate. And over time, there would be millions born into or taken into slavery. But this wasn't always certain. In 1662, Virginia declares that children born to slave women are also slaves. So now no one is born free. Freedom is not given, but it was taken. I remember the story from an old woman. She said, "My father was sold away from us when I was small. That was a sad time for us. Master wouldn't sell the mothers away from their children, so we lived on without fear of being sold. My pa, he sure did hate to leave us. He missed us, and we longed for him. He would often slip back to our cottage at night. We would gather around him and crawl up in his lap, and he tickled us for a long time. But he gave us these pleasures at a painful risk, because when his master missed him, he would beat him all the way home." And that was the life of many slaves at this time, losing friends and family, being sold, having to reconnect with different people, not knowing whether they would be beaten or sold. And so your whole life is lived in limbo, never knowing what to expect next. And how can you really connect with humans when you aren't even sure if they will be there the next day, let alone the next week or the next month? Even to think about having children must have been one of the most difficult things a slave could do. Because on one hand, the female slave was going to bear a child. And so, their whole existence wrapped around this need to produce more workers. But even in these times, there are black people, there are slaves, able to free themselves. In 1670, Zipporah Potter Atkins, a free woman of color, becomes the first African American landowner in Boston and the first black woman to own land in colonial America. So even in 1670, there were some free people able to find moderate success or simply a life without slavery. And as more blacks freed themselves from their chains of oppression, others would then see how they've made this progress and want it for themselves. Maybe you can see out a black person's farm. They have their own house, while you still live in that ragged shack with your bunk nailed to the wall. And you just lie awake when you can't sleep and dream of what it would be like to simply live in your own bed, to wake of your own accord, to work and toil for yourself, and how over time this must have been aggravating. It must have been difficult to know that there was a freedom out there, but you didn't have it. And so the first armed rebellion took place in 1676. Bacon's Rebellion, you may remember it called. Poor white former indentured servants and enslaved Africans form an alliance against bond servitude. The ruling class responds by hardening the racial caste of slavery in an attempt to divide the two races from subsequent united uprisings. So they knew what they were doing. They knew that if all indentured servants and slaves banded together, white or black, they would eventually overcome their oppressors. They would eventually win their freedom. And so to make it as difficult as possible, they begin to segregate these peoples, show the white indentured servants or slaves more leniency, maybe allowing them to eat their food. But on Sundays, you may remember seeing the Negroes up in the country, going away under large oaks and in secret places, sitting in the woods with spelling books. The best and brightest were killed during Nat's time. A deeply religious slave who led a different revolt in which nearly 60 white people were killed. All the colored folks were afraid to pray in the time of the old prophet Nat. There was no law about it, but the whites reported it round themselves that if a note was heard, we should have some dreadful punishment. And after that, the low whites would fall upon any slaves they heard praying or singing a hymn, and often killed them before their masters or mistresses could get to them. So even then, these changes would cause a ripple effect throughout U.S. history. There's one moment to define slavery and segregation in the United States. Because as they turned classes into race, they were able to segregate that portion of people. And so from that point onward, it would be the blacks that would toil in the fields, that would find themselves in full servitude to a master. And so one day, after toiling in the fields for the better part of 14 hours, you see a dark figure crouched, approaching the shack on the plantation where you live. And you find out this is a runaway slave escaping one of the nearby plantations. And he told you a story. My pappy wasn't afraid of nothing. He could from the white blood, and he runs away several times. There are big woods all around, and we sees lots of runawayers. One old fellow named John been a runawayer for 4 years. And the patrollers tries all their tricks, but they can't catch him. They wants him so bad 'cause it inspire other slaves to run away if he stays loose. They sets a trap for him. They know he like good eats. So they ranges for quitting and gives chitlins and honey. John comes, and I'm inside. When the patrollers rides up to the door, everybody gets quiet. John stands near the door, his heart pounding. You could hear the dogs barking. And when they starts to come, he grabs a shovel full of hot ashes and throws it into the patrollers' faces. He gets through and runs off hollering, "Bird in the air! Caw-caw!" One woman I saw, named Rhodey, runs off for long spells. The hounds won't hunt for her. She steals hot light bread when they put it on the window to cool, and that's how she lives. And she told my mammy how to keep the hounds from following you. You see, it's a simple trick. You take some black pepper and put it in your socks, and run without your shoes. It makes the hounds sneeze so they won't come chasing you. One day, I was in the woods, and I meets a Negro runaway. He comes to the cabin, and Mammy makes him a bacon and egg sandwich. And we never seed him again. Maybe he done got clear to Mexico, where a lot of the slaves run to. But I don't know. The patrollers were white men who served on local patrols organized throughout the South to control the movement of slaves outside their home plantations. Patrollers policed their neighborhoods by challenging any slave whom they suspected of being away from home to produce a written pass or authorization from his or her master. Slaves found without a pass were subject to arrests, beatings, and other forms of violence, some of which led to death. And as you listen to this runawayer telling you these stories, maybe you begin to think, I could do that too. I can run away. I just need some black pepper to put in my socks to keep the hounds from following me. I know where to find food if I need it. I'll check the window sills at night. Maybe you begin to get excited. To get excited that there is more to life than the life you are currently living. There's more to this world than just the plantation, slaving away the majority of the day. And maybe you start to dream fantastic dreams, your hopes, having your own farm, not a big one. You don't need anything large, just your own personal space. How nice it would be to have a place down by the river. You could toil the fields during the day, and then as the sun begins to set behind the peaks and trees, you can walk down to the river and dip your feet in, just enjoying that moment of free will. But no sooner do those dreams and thoughts come, reality sets in. And again, you find yourself inside your sleeping quarters, hardly big enough for you to even just lay down. And some of the slaves have to curl up because their bed is too short. And so, you put together a plan. You have some ideas on how to get away. And even though maybe your master has been nice as a slaver could be, that is, and you know that if you run, the patrollers, if they catch you, will do far worse than your master ever would. That element of risk. But what do? Do Do you give up on ever having freedom? Did you just subscribe to this way of life? Never wanting more, always suffering for less. And when you hear these other stories, don't you wish there was more than just this? And so, you put together a plan to escape. Maybe you'll head south to Mexico, or maybe to the north where more free blacks live. Or maybe you'll just head west. Not even sure where you're headed or what may lie ahead. All you know is that there isn't going to be the same people to the west as there are where you are currently. And so, you pack what few items you have, and over the next week, you take care to get scraps from meals, place them in a bag where you can hide through the day so that your master will not know. And you gather up enough food for a week, you think. You remember the stories. And keep in mind all the dangers out there, how to evade and not get captured. And as soon as you see the light flicker out on your master's house, catching the whiff of smoke from the candles as they're put out, you grab your bag of food, your belongings, and crouch through the doorway, crouch around the corner of your little shanty. You can see the trees 100 yards out. It's dark, so you hope no one will see you. And keeping low, you sneak through the long grass, closer and closer to the tree line. And just as you approach the tree line, the light inside your master's house flickers on. Now, it wasn't too uncommon for slaves to give up a runaway slave. And so you don't know what to expect. But what you do know is there's no turning back. And the new life that you sought is underway. And so you pick up speed, heading through the trees, maybe seeing more lights flicker on in the back. You might even hear the howl of some of the hounds. But as you rush through the woods, through the trees, ducking branches, stepping on sharp sticks, luckily, you've spent plenty of time wandering barefoot. And you were able to make good speed. The sound of the hounds fading in the distance slightly. You hope the trick with the pepper worked. You're starting to feel optimistic, hopeful that you will escape, that you will find a new place where you can be free. Now, just begin to notice the bottoms of your feet coming back into your body. And as you notice the bottoms of your feet, just begin to move your focus up the legs, up to the calves, to your knees, to your thighs, to the waist, your stomach and chest, up to the shoulders, and then down to the tips of your fingers. And just go ahead and wiggle your fingers, waking them up, getting some blood moving again. Then moving up the arms to the neck, then to the chin and jaw, to your forehead, and then the top of your head. And whenever you are ready, you can open your eyes and return to the room. And that is our session for tonight. So I hope everyone enjoyed that and got a different perspective on early slavery than perhaps you came in here with. And again, my goal is to not tell anybody what to believe or what to think about Black history or slavery in general. My only goal is to help you experience real stories from real slaves that will help you put your mind into those peoples and those eras to really see how slavery from 1619 and earlier still manifests in different ways today. So that concludes our session tonight. Thank you all. I appreciate you joining me, and I hope you will continue to come over the next 3 weeks. I know it's kind of a commitment, but I hope you will join me for the next 3 weeks in learning a little more about the Black experience. Thank you.